In the early 2000s and 20s, a tiny silicon chip became a big geopolitical issue. The United States and its allies grew alarmed at how much they relied on chips made in potentially hostile places. One idea gained traction in Washington and Tokyo: friendshoring. Friendshoring means shifting critical supply chains to friendly nations, and no supply chain was more critical than semiconductors. To secure chips, democratic allies started planning to build more fabs on their own soil or in each other's countries. Taiwan's dominance in chip manufacturing had long been seen as a strategic asset, a kind of silicon shield. The logic was that Taiwan's chip supremacy would deter aggression, because any conflict would disrupt the global tech industry. But as China's military pressure on Taiwan grew, that shield felt dangerously thin. Meanwhile, Beijing was pouring billions into its semiconductor industry, aiming for self-sufficiency. Washington responded by tightening the screws. By 2018, a tech trade war was in full swing. The US slapped export controls on advanced chip tech to China, and it pushed partners like Japan to follow suit. Japan holds a unique role in the chip world. It isn't a leader in making chips anymore, but it dominates in making the machines and materials needed to produce them. Recognizing this, the US and Japan began coordinating on export restrictions to constrain China's chip advances. Semiconductors were now treated like strategic weapons, not just consumer goods. Then came the shock of 2021. A global semiconductor shortage hit virtually every industry, and Japan was among the hardest hit. Factories went idle for lack of chips. In September 2021, Toyota, famed for its just-in-time manufacturing, slashed its production by 40% because essential microchips were unavailable. For a tech-driven economy like Japan, this was a national wake-up call. Suddenly, semiconductors were a top national security priority in Tokyo. Japan's leaders spoke about economic security and the need for supply chain resilience. In late 2021, the government created a new cabinet position dedicated to economic security, a world first, explicitly to safeguard crucial technologies like chips. It was clear that Japan would never again take a stable chip supply for granted. The solution was to build new alliances and bring chip production closer to home. The US passed the CHIPS Act to incentivize domestic production, and it urged allies to invest in their own capacity. Japan responded with a comprehensive semiconductor strategy in 2021. A core part of that plan was to invite foreign chip makers, especially TSMC, to set up production in Japan with hefty government support. From TSMC's perspective, this was a dramatic shift. The company had thrived by concentrating manufacturing in Taiwan, leveraging efficiency and a tight local ecosystem. But now TSMC faced pressure from multiple angles. Its biggest customers, like Apple, were anxious about over-reliance on one place. At the same time, governments in the US and Japan were offering billions of dollars in incentives for TSMC to build fabs on their shores. TSMC also had to consider the mounting risks at home. Taiwan had recently suffered power blackouts and droughts that threatened chip production. And the constant question of, what if something happens with China, was growing louder. Diversifying manufacturing sites, once anathema to TSMC's business model, started to look prudent. The challenge was doing it without undermining the advantages of its Taiwan base. By late 2021, all the pieces were in place. The United States was quietly encouraging a Chip 4 alliance, linking chip powerhouses in a circle of trust: the US, Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea. Japan and Taiwan in particular saw new reasons to collaborate. Both share democratic values and a wary view of Beijing, and both could complement each other in chips: Taiwan with its manufacturing prowess, Japan with its materials and industrial might. Geopolitics, in short, created an imperative for action. Japan needed to secure its chip supply and revitalize a strategic industry. Taiwan needed partners and diversification to protect its crown jewel, TSMC. Under the umbrella of US encouragement, these forces drove Japan and TSMC into each other's arms. the stage was set for an alliance anchored in a simple question: how do we keep the chips flowing no matter what? Geopolitics set the stage, but corporate interests wrote the next chapter. TSMC's move to Japan wasn't just about government strategy. It made sense for some of the biggest companies in both countries. The alliance around the new factory had clear business logic behind it. Start with Sony. Sony's crown jewel is its image sensor business, the tiny camera chips inside smartphones and high-end cameras. Sony leads the world in image sensors, but to make the best sensors, you also need cutting-edge logic chips to process the images. For years, Sony relied on TSMC in Taiwan to fabricate those companion logic chips that get paired with its sensors. This arrangement worked, but it meant Sony's most important component was being made an ocean away. By 2021, Sony knew it needed a more secure supply of those logic chips, ideally made in Japan itself. So when TSMC floated the idea of a Japanese plant, Sony jumped on board. The company committed $500 million for a minority stake in the venture. Having TSMC build chips next door would guarantee Sony a steady flow of processors for its sensors, even if global supply chains fractured. In a world of frequent shortages, that assurance was worth the hefty price tag. There was another player quietly nudging this plan: Apple. Apple is TSMC's biggest customer and uses Sony's image sensors in its iPhones. Apple, always paranoid about supply chain risks, liked the idea of key camera components being made in multiple countries. If Sony could get its sensor-related chips fabricated in Japan, iPhone production would be less vulnerable to any Taiwan disruptions. In effect, Apple's desire for a safety net reinforced Sony's motivation. The message was clear: a TSMC fab in Japan would benefit everyone in this chain. Now consider Japan's automotive giants. The 2021 chip shortage was devastating for car makers. Denso, one of the world's top auto parts suppliers and a close affiliate of Toyota, watched its assembly lines grind to a halt because of chip scarcity. Toyota itself had to scale back production despite full order books. They learned the hard way that without a secure source of semiconductors, even the best-run manufacturing system can collapse. So when the opportunity arose to anchor a new chip factory in Japan, the auto industry wanted in. In early 2022, Denso joined the TSMC-Sony initiative as an additional investor, putting up around $350 million. This wasn't charity, it was about influence and access. By investing, Denso ensured that automotive chips would be a focus at the new fab. It was essentially pre-ordering capacity for the future to keep the car industry supplied come what may. Denso's involvement also prompted an upgrade in the factory's plans. Initially, TSMC's Japan plant was going to produce 22 nanometer and 28 nanometer chips, perfectly fine for many uses, including current image sensors and car electronics, but not very advanced by modern standards. After Denso came aboard, TSMC agreed to add 12 nanometer and 16 nanometer technology to the mix. Those more advanced nodes mean the fab can make faster and more complex chips suitable for things like next-generation automotive AI or high-end consumer electronics. Toyota later decided to directly join as well, taking a small stake to underline how vital this project was for Japan's auto sector. Beyond individual companies, there was a broader industrial logic drawing TSMC to Japan: the country's underappreciated semiconductor strengths. Japan isn't a leader in chip production anymore, but it excels in the things that make chip production possible. Japanese firms dominate many semiconductor materials: silicon wafers, specialty chemicals, photoresists, and produce some of the world's best chip-making equipment. In fact, TSMC had long been a customer of Japan's toolmakers and material suppliers. By building a fab in Japan, TSMC could tap directly into this rich ecosystem. Need ultra-pure chemicals or precision lithography machines? In Kumamoto, those might be available from a supplier just down the highway instead of shipped overseas. This proximity can improve efficiency and collaboration. TSMC could work more closely with companies like Tokyo Electron for equipment, or Shin-Etsu Chemical for wafers, fine-tuning processes in real time. Japan's local supply chain and know-how were a big part of the appeal. There's also human capital and manufacturing culture to consider. Japan still has experienced engineers from its earlier semiconductor era, and universities and companies continue to train talent in electronics. While TSMC would bring many of its own people to jumpstart the operation, having a base in Japan allows it to recruit and cultivate local engineers over time. Culturally, Japan's meticulous approach to manufacturing, an obsession with quality and continuous improvement, aligns well with TSMC's needs in a cutting-edge fab. In many ways, this partnership would merge TSMC's leading processes with Japan's manufacturing excellence. In summary, the corporate and industrial logic for TSMC's Japan venture was compelling on all fronts. Sony would secure a domestic source for the chips that power its world-beating image sensors. Toyota and Denso would sleep easier knowing critical auto chips would be made in Japan and not subject to overseas bottlenecks. TSMC, on the other hand, would gain a foothold in a country with unparalleled strengths in materials, equipment, and reliability. Each stakeholder had a lot to gain, turning the project into a win-win, or rather, win-win-win scenario. Big ambitions and corporate plans don't automatically build factories. That takes concrete deals and heaps of money. This is where Japan's government stepped in as the grand orchestrator. How could Japan and TSMC actually make this partnership happen? The answer was, by crafting a clever deal and putting serious money on the table. In mid-2021, Meti unveiled a national semiconductor strategy that essentially put out a welcome mat for foreign chip makers. Japan openly declared it would invite leading companies like TSMC to build fabs domestically in cooperation with Japanese firms. Not long after, officials began courting TSMC with a simple pitch: build in Japan, and we will support you in every way possible. By late 2021, these talks turned into a tangible deal. TSMC agreed to establish a subsidiary in Japan, Japan Advanced Semiconductor Manufacturing, JASM, to run the new Kumamoto plant. The structure of JASM ensured TSMC had control, with a majority stake, but it also brought in Japanese partners as minority shareholders. Sony took part, around 20% ownership, and later Denso, around 10%, with Toyota adding a small stake as well. The message was that while TSMC will run the show, Japanese industry will be co-invested in the outcome. Those Japanese partners weren't just there in name, they effectively became anchor customers for the fab. Sony's involvement meant the fab is committed to making the chips Sony needs for its sensors. Denso and Toyota's participation ensured a portion of capacity is earmarked for auto-related chips. In other words, the venture was designed so that when the factory opens, much of its output is spoken for by the very companies that helped bring it to life. Then there's the matter of money. Building a modern chip fab costs a fortune, on the order of billions of dollars. To tip the scales in favor of Japan, the government put a massive subsidy on the table. Early estimates pegged the first phase of the project at roughly $7 billion. Japan's government offered to foot up to half the bill. Indeed, in 2021, it budgeted several $billion expressly to support TSMC's plant. This generous backing significantly de-risked the investment for TSMC. As plans became more ambitious, for instance, adding the 12-16 nanometer technology and greater capacity, the budget grew to about $8.6 billion. Japan matched it, ensuring the funding gap was covered. And the vision didn't stop there. By early 2024, a second fab was announced for the late 2020s, bringing total planned investment above $20 billion. The government signaled it would likewise heavily subsidize that. When all is said and done, Japan's total support for TSMC's venture could easily exceed $10 billion. It's an enormous sum, but Tokyo sees it as an investment in economic security, Another key facet of the deal was collaboration on technology. TSMC agreed to establish a research center in Tsukuba, near Tokyo, focused on advanced chip packaging, 3D integration and chip stacking technologies. This joint R&D effort, supported by government funds, means Japanese researchers and companies get to work side by side with TSMC on next-generation innovations. It ensures Japan not only gets to produce chips, but also partakes in developing future semiconductor technologies. From the start, Meti coordinated these elements meticulously. It brought together TSMC and Japanese firms, arranged the subsidy framework, and even set up programs with universities to train engineers for the new fab. Essentially, Meti acted as the project manager for this entire undertaking, smoothing over regulatory hurdles and aligning everyone's incentives. By 2022, JASM was up and running and construction in Kumamoto was underway. A foreign chipmaker, Japanese tech companies, and the Japanese state were all locked into an unprecedented partnership. It was friend-shoring come to life, shifting production to a friendly country through an alliance of both public and private players. The results of these deal mechanics are clear. When the Kumamoto fab begins production, which started by late 2024, it will do so with guaranteed customers, shared financial burdens, and full political support. This reduces risk for TSMC and accelerates Japan's national goal of securing a stable chip supply. In short, the framework of subsidies, joint ventures, and partnerships engineered by Meti made it not only possible, but attractive for TSMC to plant its flag in Japan. The grand alliance between TSMC and Japan isn't just playing out in boardrooms, it's transforming the landscape of Kumamoto. What was once a quiet rural area is now buzzing with construction, new faces, and economic energy. The impact of TSMC's arrival can be felt in everyday life. Take Kumamoto's real estate. Ever since the chip factory was announced, land and home prices have surged. Fields and lots that were once inexpensive are suddenly in high demand. New housing developments and apartments are springing up to accommodate incoming workers. The community is adjusting to the sensation of becoming a semiconductor boomtown. The fab itself will employ around 1,700 people once fully operational, including several hundred veteran engineers from Taiwan and from Sony, and well over 1,000 new local hires. And that's just direct employment. Add the suppliers and contractors moving in, and total new jobs could reach 7,000 or more. For local residents, that means unprecedented opportunities in a high-tech field right at home. For the region's economy, it's a major jolt of activity and optimism. Of course, rapid growth brings growing pains. Almost overnight, roads around the site have become congested. Endless convoys of trucks haul in equipment and materials, and the influx of commuters has created traffic jams on roads that never saw much traffic before. TSMC's CEO noted that a drive that used to take 10 minutes can now take an hour. The problem became serious enough that TSMC decided to pause the start of its second fab until infrastructure is upgraded. In response, local authorities are widening roads and bolstering public transport to catch up with the development. What was once a sleepy corner of Kyushu now finds itself dealing with big city traffic issues. There are cultural changes too. TSMC has brought hundreds of Taiwanese engineers and their families to help launch the plant and train the workforce. These new residents are becoming part of the community. You might hear Mandarin spoken in local supermarkets or see Taiwanese-style dishes appear on restaurant menus. By and large, Kumamoto has welcomed them. Locals take pride that their town was chosen for this project and are curious about their new neighbors. It's a small-scale example of Japan and Taiwan's people becoming more intertwined. Building up a skilled workforce is a top priority, and it's led to new educational partnerships. TSMC and Japanese universities have teamed up to train the next generation of chip engineers. Local universities in Kyushu have started semiconductor programs in collaboration with the company. There are exchange programs sending young Japanese engineers to Taiwan for hands-on training at TSMC's fabs, and Taiwanese experts are teaching courses in Japan. This cross-pollination of talent is setting the foundation for a self-sustaining semiconductor ecosystem in Japan for years to come. TSMC's presence is also drawing an entire supply chain to Kumamoto. The new fab has acted like a magnet for suppliers. Japanese equipment makers have announced plans to build support facilities nearby to service TSMC's machinery. Materials companies are setting up local production for the ultra-pure chemicals and silicon wafers the fab needs. Even foreign suppliers are considering opening offices in the region to be closer to their customer. In effect, a mini semiconductor hub is forming in southern Japan, where none existed before. The ripple effects go even further. TSMC's move has boosted confidence in Japan's broader semiconductor resurgence. Seeing this success, other players are following suit. Another Taiwanese chip manufacturer has announced plans for a smaller fab in Japan, and the Japanese government is backing separate projects to develop next-generation chips with international partners. What started in Kumamoto is building into a wider Japan-Taiwan tech partnership, with both countries' industries becoming more intertwined. For Kumamoto's residents, daily life has undeniably changed. The local airport is adding flights, new businesses are opening to cater to tech workers, and the region is gaining a new identity tied to high-tech manufacturing. Many long-time residents who once knew semiconductors only as an abstract industry now see evidence of it every day. Whether it's a convoy of sealed equipment trucks passing by, or a group of engineers grabbing dinner in town after their shift. All of this shows how global strategy translates into local reality. A few years ago, the idea of the world's leading chip maker setting up in rural Japan seemed unlikely. Today, it's a tangible presence reshaping communities. The chip war and friendshoring aren't just headlines. They're new roads being paved and new friendships being formed across languages. This story is ultimately about adaptation and partnership. Faced with geopolitical storms and supply risks, two nations and several corporations forged a pact to help each other. The results span from diplomatic strategy down to the streets of Kumamoto, blending global vision with local impact. In an era when technology equals power, the TSMC-Japan alliance demonstrates that cooperation can create security and prosperity. Former rivals in industry have become allies, building a semiconductor ecosystem stronger than either could alone. As chips begin rolling off the production line in Kumamoto, they symbolize not just technological achievement, but a triumph of alliance, proof that in protecting the future, friends are better than going it alone.